Hi, this is Whitney Kurtz Ogilvy, and today we're going to talk about improving your writing process with pre-writing and revision. I'm going to give you some really specific advice for both of those things. And as usual, I'd ask that if you want to share or distribute part or whole of this presentation, that you please ask me first, and you'll find my email address at the end of the presentation if you'd like to do that. So today we're going to cover two basic themes: pre-writing in the form of outlines and prospectuses. We'll talk a little bit about reasons to use outlines, reasons to use a prospectus versus an outline, and how to do both of those things. And then part two is revision tips. We'll talk a little about why revision is so important and some specific techniques for revising your work effectively. So part one, pre-writing, outlines and prospectuses. So what is an outline? An outline is a blueprint of your paper. So just in the same way that an architect uses a blueprint to plan a building, you're going to use an outline to plan what you're going to write. And by the way, this also applies to presentations, posters, really anything that you're going to write or present, you can make an outline of. And you make an outline to plan both the content of your project, what's going to go into your paper, especially the main ideas and the most important evidence that you use to support your main ideas, and also organization. So what order will you put your ideas in? How will you structure your paper? What sorts of headings and subheadings will you use, etc.? An outline is a plan for all of that. So obviously you're doing this before you sit down to write. So why should you outline? Well, number one is an outline can suggest possible headings and subheadings because you're going to get a sense of what your main ideas are. An outline can also help you to focus on content while you're writing instead of on organization, because by the time you sit down to write, you've already decided on what organization you're going to use. So when you are writing, you can just focus on what you want to say and not have to worry about what order to put it in. An outline can also help keep you focused as you write. If you tend to ramble, if you tend to get off topic, as many of us do, an outline might help you keep focused on the points that you want to focus on. And it can also help to ensure a logical argument, a logical smooth flow to the paper. Again, it's very useful in planning organization. So all of those are very good reasons to use outlines. Outlines can be formal or informal. Here's our little formal butler guide to signify formal outlines. And a formal outline is going to use a consistent format, so like Roman numerals or bullet points. The most important thing, whatever format you use for your outline, is to use what we call subordinating structure. And that is just like what I'm using in this slide to indicate sort of the difference between the main ideas and the supporting details. So as you can see on this slide, I have the sort of the topic sentence saying the formal outline uses a consistent format, and then I have two little subpoints there that both support and expand on that main point. And you're going to do that in your outline because you want to be able to plan main ideas and then make sure you have adequate support for each of those main ideas. Word processing programs like Microsoft Word often have formal outline templates, so you might explore that in your Word or whatever software you use for word processing if you would need help deciding on a structure. I like to use bullet points personally, but it's totally up to you. And then there's informal outlines, so we've got our little Fonzie looking dude there to symbolize informal, and they might take the form of index cards or sticky notes, clustering or mapping. We'll talk a little bit more in a minute about what that is, or just simply lists. So it just kind of might be you just jotting down some ideas. And that is perfectly legitimate too if that's what works best for you. A lot of this is trial and error. So some people might work better with a formal outline. Some people might work better with more informal structure. So you should definitely experiment and see what works best for you. Whether formal or informal, a successful outline should map the paper from start to finish. It should make a clear distinction between what are the main ideas and what are the support for main ideas, and it should keep you focused. Remember, you want to focus on your purpose statement, what is the most important thing that you want to say in this paper, and I think it's a good idea to write your purpose statement at the beginning of your outline, and you can keep referring back to that so that you're sure to stay on topic and on task throughout your outline. You should use any headings or subheadings that are required if you have an assignment for class or if you are submitting to a journal and they require particular headings and subheadings. You're going to want to build those into your outline. You also might want to try building in topic sentences and transitions. So, for example, when you're outlining a paragraph, maybe actually write out the topic sentence for that paragraph in your outline. You also might want to indicate how you're going to transition from one section to another, one idea to another, and you can scribble that into the outline. Now, keep in mind that an outline is just a pre-writing tool. It doesn't mean that you have to be absolutely married to this particular structure, that you have to stick to it like glue. And you may find that as you're writing your first draft, you may want to review and revise your outline. It might be that you don't really end up liking one particular ordering for 2 or 3 paragraphs in there or something like that, or you might want to cut something, and that is perfectly okay. Don't feel like just because something is in your outline that you have to stick to that exactly as you wrote it, because it's just a tool. It's just there to guide you. It's there to serve you. You're not there to serve it. So feel free to make any changes that are necessary as you go along. Feel free to add details, to take things out if you need to. It's just there as a guide. So outlining techniques. To get started, the first thing to do when you're going to make an outline is to review your materials. So your class notes, your source materials, notes that you've taken on things you've read, etc., etc. And a good place to start is to make a list of main topics. So how might you group all of this material, all your notes, all your sources into main ideas? Again, going back to the idea of topic sentences, that can be a really good way to do that. Going back to the idea of headings and subheadings, that can be a good way to do this. But to start to group similar ideas together and sort of come up with main themes or main topics or main ideas. And then once you've done that, you can start to think, how do I want to organize these main ideas? What order do I want to put them in? And if you're unsure how to do this, a good technique is to try writing your main ideas on index cards. Stick to one main idea per card, and then you can actually physically lay all those cards out on the table or on the floor, and you can just experiment with arranging and rearranging the order of them. And that will sometimes give you a really good idea of the best organizational structure to use. Now, if you don't like lists and you don't like the idea of bullet points and all this seems a little bit too neat and tidy to you, then you may prefer the informal outlining method of mapping or clustering. So a map or a cluster is a pictorial arrangement of ideas. A lot of people do it by using circles, like they'll draw a big circle in the middle of the page and they'll put their sort of main idea in the center. Like, let's say I wanted to write a paper about the management of chronic pain. So in the center, I would put management of chronic pain in a circle. And then your supporting ideas start to spider web out from there. Now you can do this on a piece of paper, or you can use post-it notes or index cards, and you can put sort of one main idea on each one. Start with the main overall topic in the middle and spider web out from there. And that is a more organic way of outlining. For some people, that is more comfortable. It works better for them. It helps them get an idea of what the main ideas that they want to use might be without being too prescriptive or too neat and tidy. Some people don't like to be neat and tidy at the very beginning of their writing process. They like to have a little more room to spread out and try different things and be creative, and that's perfectly okay if that is how you prefer to work. Here is a sample outline for an article called Using Grand Rounds for Staff Development. And I just want you to have a look at this. This is, again, that subordinating structure where we have main ideas and then we have supporting details, and it's very easy to see sort of what the main ideas are and what the supporting details are. So we have the idea of grand rounds as sort of the overall topic. And then we have the first main idea is the types of grand rounds. And then we have 3 pieces of support for that. So one type is observation and interview of patient or several patients on the unit. Another type is a webcast of grand rounds conducted elsewhere. Another type is a multimedia program of grand rounds. And then we have another subtopic of uses. And then we have observed the patient with a specific condition. We have discuss assessment and analysis of data. We have propose interventions, examine issues in care, collaborate with others, keep nurses up to date. And those are all uses of grand rounds. So we see the overall topic here of grand rounds, and then we see two subtopics, types of grand rounds and uses of grand rounds, and then specific support for each of those. And you can see each one is on a separate line. It's very obvious what is a subtopic of what. That's a really good structure for an outline right there. There's another page as well. There's another subtopic, delivery of grand rounds, and the various ways you can deliver them. So that is a nice sample outline right there. Here's another sample outline. This is a sample for a research manuscript. And this one doesn't use the Roman numerals and letters and numbers and all that. It's just kind of more bullet points. Starts with an introduction, which is a typical heading. Extensive research on defining and measuring healthcare quality, limited attention to consumers' perspectives of quality care, purposes to identify importance to consumers of indicators of quality healthcare and nursing care, to examine the relationships of health status and demographic variables to consumer views. So there's the info that they want in the introduction. And then for the methods section, they'll tell us it's an exploratory design. It has 239 consumers in a convenience sample, how they were selected from the waiting rooms of clinics and neighborhoods, the instruments they used. And then we get to the results section, and they've got, tables there that they're going to use and what those tables will say, indicators of quality healthcare most important to consumers, indicators of quality nursing care most important to consumers, differences based on race and ethnicity, on income and on educational level, etc., etc. And then we get down to the discussion section, where they'll discuss the consistency of their findings with those of other studies, the implications for teaching patients in clinics, the limitations of their study, and the next steps in their research agenda. So these are two different types of outlines, two different formats. The first one was very formal with Roman numerals and letters and numbers, and the second was just more of a list. But in both we can see that there are main ideas and there are subtopics, varying degrees of detail here, but both good outlines for different types of papers. And I don't have a sample of a cluster or a map, but if you Google that, if you Google clustering example, you will definitely find plenty of them if you're interested in that method. So, do you feel like outlines sound a little too prescriptive, like it might ask a little more of you at that early stage of the planning process than you're able to give? Are you the type of person who really needs to start writing before they can really know what they're writing about? Some experts would agree with you that outlines are a little too prescriptive. There are two schools of thought on this, and my feeling is it just depends on the person. It depends on the writer. Some people really find outlines helpful. Other people feel restricted by them. And there is a wonderful professor, John Bean, who is an expert in critical thinking and an expert in writing instruction. And he says, asking for outlines early in the writing process distorts the composing process of many writers who discover and clarify their ideas in the act of writing. So that is the other side of this coin. And if this is you, if you are one of those writers who likes to discover and clarify your ideas while writing, then you might try a prospectus instead of an outline. So a prospectus is an actual piece of prose. It's usually going to be a page or two long. It's going to be, written in paragraph form. And how you do a prospectus is you're going to describe the problem or the topic at hand and how you plan to tackle it. Okay, so it's a more general, more loosey-goosey kind of piece of writing where you just tell us, here's where I'm at right now, here's the problem or the topic I'm going to cover, here's what I plan to address. And to guide you in that, here are some potential questions that you might address in a prospectus. And that's not to say that these are the only things that you would address or that you have to address all of these things. These are just example questions, okay? So in addition to describing your problem and how you plan to tackle it, you might address the question, what makes this problem problematic? What caused this problem? What is causing it? Why does this topic exist? Why is it important? Who are the stakeholders? Who does this problem or this topic matter to? What are some of the sources that you plan to use to support your main points? So in other words, what kind of literature are you bringing in? What kind of evidence do you have so far? What do those pieces of literature say about your topic? What are they going to add to the discussion? Those are just a few examples, but the prospectus should kind of be a more free-form plan of exactly what you're going to cover and how. And again, you're going to keep it to 1 or 2 pages, and it's just a little bit more organic and a little bit less rigid than an outline. So I would advise you to try both of those things. Maybe try the one that sounds best to you first, and I think you'll discover very quickly which one is most useful to you. Again, it just depends on you and on your process, but I would definitely suggest doing one of these 2 things before you actually sit down to write a first draft. So moving on from pre-writing to revision, and we're going to talk a little bit about some specific revision tips. So there's this myth, this sort of common misperception that if you have to revise your work, that means you're a bad writer. That if you don't get it perfect right out of the gate, that means there's something wrong with your writing. And that could not be further from the truth. Revision is an essential part of everyone's writing process. Absolutely everybody. Nobody writes a first draft that is perfect. It just does not happen. And if you ask any published author, any mentor that you work with at the hospital, any professor that you've worked with who's published, they will tell you the same thing, that before they publish a paper, even people who are very widely published and distinguished writers, that their papers will go through 10 or 12 or more revisions before they finally get it published. So revision is part of the equation. It is simply a necessary part of everyone's writing process, period. And part of the reason for that is because writing isn't about a finished product. Writing is a thinking process. The process of writing itself stimulates creativity and it stimulates critical thinking. We were talking about that a minute ago. That's one of the reasons why some people don't really like outlines, because it's in the act of writing that we come up with these ideas. You will have ideas through multiple revisions that you would never have thought of otherwise. So that's part of why revision is so important, because the more you write and the more you dig into your own work and the more changes you make and the more thinking you do, the better, the more richly textured your work will become and the more ideas that will occur to you. So revision is really important. So let's talk about how to revise. My first tip is probably my easiest one, and that is to take a break from what you're writing. Put your paper away for a while. Now, this is tough for some of us because some of us are procrastinators, and I definitely, all through college and all through grad school, was guilty of this. I would wait until the day before the paper was due to write it, but I'm telling you right now, it is better to plan ahead and give yourself time so that you can take a break from what you're writing. The reason that is so necessary and important is because we can sometimes get so close to our work. We're up to our eyelids in it. We've been working on it day and night. And we get so close to it that we can't even see it anymore. We obsess so much about the little tiny details that we can miss big, glaring, global problems with content. Or maybe the other way around. We're obsessing so much about the big ideas that we miss that there's, tons and tons of typos or tons of little grammar mistakes. Everybody, I think, has had that experience of going back and reading something that they wrote a few months ago or a few weeks ago or a year ago and thinking, oh my goodness, how did I think that made sense? So I would say, read through your paper and then put it aside for as long as humanly possible, at least a few days, but ideally longer. And when you come back to that paper, I guarantee you will see it with fresh eyes and you will find things that you didn't see before. It's a good idea when you're doing this to schedule a specific time to come back and revise your paper. Because if you know exactly when you're going to get back to it, it'll help you to keep your mind off it during your break and to not obsess about it. So put it away and say, okay, I'm going to start on this again next Friday. And that way you don't have to worry about it. It's off your mind. Before you take a break, it's a good idea to send your paper to 1 or 2 colleagues for feedback. So while you're taking a break, they can be looking over your paper and giving you a fresh pair of eyes and giving you feedback. Choose somebody who you really trust, who you feel like has good insight into what you're writing about. This can be a mentor, a professor. It could be me as your writing specialist. It could even be a friend or family member whose opinion you trust. And then when you come back to your paper, you're going to see things you've missed before. Now, another piece of advice I give everybody is that the best way by far to proofread your paper is to read it out loud. If you don't already do this, guys, seriously start doing it today. This is the best way by a long shot to catch mistakes, to catch poor sentence structure, to catch problems both big and small. And there is a mountain of research to support that in my field of writing instruction. So that is a very evidence-based piece of advice there, that reading aloud is by far the best way to catch mistakes. So that's tip number one. Tip number two is what we call a reverse outline. So where a pre-writing outline is a blueprint of what you plan to write, a reverse outline is a map of what you've already written. Now, they're going to look the same. So those sample outlines that I showed you back in part one, a reverse outline is going to look very much like that visually. Same structure to differentiate among the main ideas and support for main ideas, and then, commentary on that support, etc. You're going to have everything on a separate line like that. But again, where the pre-writing outline was a plan, this reverse outline is a map. And I want to preface this by saying that this reverse outline is probably the most popular tip that I've ever given my students. And I've been teaching for a long time, and I've taught the reverse outline for years and years and years. And I can tell you for sure that when I used to get course evaluations of my classes and stuff, and they would ask, what was the most useful thing that you took from this course? Oftentimes it was the reverse outline. And the reason I preface this by saying that is because sometimes when I tell people what a reverse outline is, they glaze over because it sounds so time consuming. But I am telling you right now, people absolutely love the reverse outline. If you take the time to do this, you will see its value. I promise you that. People have thanked me and thanked me and thanked me for teaching them this. So that said, why do a reverse outline? Well, if you do it well, a reverse outline will show you all sorts of things. It'll show you if you're trying to accomplish too much in one paragraph. It will show you if you have problems with organization and structure, if you have paragraphs that are out of place. It will tell you if you need more evidence to support a point. It will tell you if you're not doing enough analysis, if you're not putting enough of yourself and your own insights and opinions into your paper, if you're just doing summary and you're not really doing any critical thinking of your own. And it's also going to tell you if you're repeating yourself unnecessarily, which happens a lot, especially when people write long papers. They will end up saying the same things again and again and again. And that can be hard to see because, let's say you've written a 15-page paper. It is really tough to remember, if you're just reading it from page 1 to page 10, what all you've covered. It's really difficult to slog through pages and pages and pages of text and try to keep track of what order your ideas were in, what all you've covered and what all you haven't. It's just really tough to do. So this makes it much, much easier. The reverse outline can also help you write your topic sentences, which is really important because topic sentences really make your main points clear. It helps you see the relationship between your main ideas, between each paragraph and section to your overall purpose or your overall thesis of your paper. So it's really very useful. And I can tell you as the writing specialist, when people ask me for help with a paper, if I start reading it and I think, okay, this thing is a little bit of a mess, it's got a lot of organizational problems, I will stop reading and I will start reverse outlining that paper myself so that I can get a clear idea of the structure of the paper and what all the main ideas are. So I actually use this as a teacher as well as on my own writing. It's very, very helpful. So how do you do it? Well, to make a reverse outline, you're going to go through your draft. You're going to go paragraph by paragraph. And you can either do this on a fresh sheet of paper or you can do it on index cards. You can do it on Post-it notes. You can even scribble in the margins of the printed out paper if you really want to. And you're going to list the main point or the main idea in every paragraph. And then using subordinating structures we talked about earlier to differentiate between main ideas and supporting details, you're going to take note of main ideas and support for those main ideas. And if you're thorough, you're going to end up with a very detailed map of your paper. Now again, it sounds time consuming, but in the long run, I promise you it saves you time because it makes it so much easier to see the problems in a long paper especially. It's very, very helpful and people absolutely love this technique. So I'm going to show you how to do this using a sample paragraph from an article. So first let's read this paragraph and then I'm going to show you how I would reverse outline this paragraph. Several reasons exist to consider home care services as an option in the care of elders. First, institutionalization is costly and home care can delay or forestall institutionalization. Second, elders who use home care services have better health outcomes such as prevention or delay of onset of acute illness, control of acute illness episodes, and management of chronic conditions. Third, home care services provide needed assistance and education to distressed family caregivers and reduce caregiving burden. Empirical studies with primarily Anglo-American samples have shown that higher caregiving burden leads to more admissions to long-term care facilities or to greater use of home care services. The purpose of this study was to examine factors that predict use of home care services by Mexican American elders. Okay, so here is a sample reverse outline of this paragraph. So the main idea is that there are several reasons to consider home care services for elders, and that study is going to look at the factors that predict the use of those services by Mexican American elders. So subpoint 1, institutionalization is expensive, and home care can delay that expense. Better outcomes for elders who use home care include prevention or delay of acute illness, control of acute illness episodes, and management of chronic conditions. And then the third subplot of the main idea is home care provides assistance and education to caregivers and ultimately reduces their burden. And then there's some support for that studies show that a higher burden equals greater admissions to long-term care and greater use of home care services. So if you go back and look again at the paragraph, it's a big block of text, and then this kind of makes that more manageable. Now, do you have to do this in this much detail? Do you have to use complete sentences like I did? Absolutely, you do not. You can use your own form of shorthand, and in fact, I normally would have too, except that I wanted to make it very clear what I was covering. So I made this a little more detailed just because of that. But the most important thing is you're going to want to indicate what the main idea of the paragraph is, and that's up here with Roman numeral 1, what each major subpoint is, and that's your A, B, and C, and then the sort for those, which is your Arabic numerals 1, 2, and 3. But you can write it in shorthand. You don't have to use complete sentences. As long as you understand it, it's all good. And basically what this says is what I just told you. So reverse outlining can be terrific. Now, there's another tip that can also be really, really useful, and it is called color coding. Now, one of the main problems that I see and that I hear professors at the College of Nursing complaining about with student writing is that a lot of writers focus mostly on summarizing facts and summarizing the ideas that they've read about. And they don't include enough of their own critical thinking. They don't include enough of their own analysis, their own interpretations of those facts. So they sort of just give us a book report. Like, here's what I read about today. And when that happens, we end up with very shallow writing, and we're left wondering, well, why are you telling me this? Why is this significant? What does this mean? And that's a problem. That leaves us with very shallow writing, and it's not writing that really adds anything to the discipline. Facts are important, but the most important thing, especially if you're writing on the graduate level, is to address the so what question and examine the implications of those facts and what they mean for us. Color coding can help you ensure that you have a good balance of main ideas, facts, and your own analysis and commentary on those facts. So if you're getting feedback from editors or from professors like, there's not enough analysis in here, you need to go deeper, you need to ask more questions, etc., etc. If that's the kind of feedback you're getting, then color coding is definitely going to help you with that. So for this technique, you will need 3 highlighters or 3 colored pencils or 3 different colored pens, or if you want to just do it in Word, just 3 different font colors in your word processing program. And you're going to go through your paper and you're going to use color number 1 to highlight general assertions. And that is going to be your topic sentences, your main ideas. So your main ideas, your topic sentences, that's color number 1. Color number 2 is used to highlight the specific evidence you provide for each main point, for each assertion. So this is going to be your factual information, your quotations, your statistics and your numbers, your paraphrased and summarized material from sources, examples from sources. This is mostly going to be factual information, stuff that you get from source material. Color number 3 is where your own analysis comes in. So any kind of discussion of the implications of the facts you've uncovered, so what it means for practice, what it means for further research, what you can do with this information now that you've uncovered it, what the gaps are in our understanding of this information, what information is still missing, questions remain to be answered. All of that, anytime you're bringing in your own understanding, your own analysis, your own discussion, your own opinions, and your own perspectives, that is color number 3. And when color coding, what you're looking for is a good balance of those 3 elements. A good balance between general assertions, which are your topic sentences and your main ideas, supporting evidence, which are your facts and your statistics, and analysis, which is your own discussion, your own reaction, your own commentary on those facts. Now, if the balance is off, this will be obvious, and what often happens is people will color code their papers and they'll see that they've got, plenty of number 1 and number 2, but hardly any number 3. And there you go. Now you know that you need to do more analysis, you need to do more critical thinking, you need to think about the implications of what you've written and what it means for practice and what it means for further research. So it makes it easier again to see the problems and the mistakes. And there is a wonderful tutorial on this on the University of North Carolina Writing Center website. I've got a link down here that you can click on. And there's more information there about that. So a couple of revision tips. One thing that I hear from students a lot is that they worry about making big changes to their drafts, especially as regards organization, like moving paragraphs around and things like that, because they worry that they're going to forget the way that they had the original version, which is a completely valid concern, and I can completely understand that. But there's a real easy way to avoid this worry, and that is to save a master copy of your first draft. Just going to leave it alone, save it as is. You can call it, draft number 1 or whatever. And then open a few blank documents and copy and paste the draft. And then you can have 2 or 3 versions that you can mess with, that you can make changes, you can move things around, you can cut stuff, you can add stuff, and you can make several of these working copies so that you can feel free to try new things. And that way you won't have to worry that you've forgotten the original order that you had everything in. So real simple little technique. All right, guys, well, I hope you found this presentation helpful. These are such crucial steps in the writing process, pre-writing and revision both. So I really hope that you will incorporate these suggestions going forward. And if you have any questions about anything in this presentation, or if you'd like help with a writing project or presentation, don't hesitate to contact me. And my email address is whitney.ko@uky.edu. And I thank you so much for listening to this presentation. I hope it's been useful, and I would love to hear your feedback about offering these video and audio workshops occasionally instead of in-person ones. I feel like it's so tough for people to make it in the middle of a workday that it might be better for some of you to have more video workshops and less in-person ones. But I would love to hear from you about that. So please don't hesitate to email me if you have thoughts on that. And everybody have a great night. Take care.